Started here. This is the session 6A, which is for the technologies. So we have 5 papers in this session. The first one is the speaker will be Shrika Vanavasam from University of Illinois. His advisor is Professor Nansam Kim, and his research topic is mostly related to the networking and such as smart NICs and RDMA stuff. And this talk will be about hardware-assisted load balancing for smart NIC-Host collaborative computing. So let's welcome the speakers.
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction. So I'm Shrika Vanavasam.
Do you want to use this?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. So I'm Shrika Vanavasam. I'm a PhD student at the University of Illinois, and I'm excited to present our work here today. So today I'll be talking about HAL, hardware-assisted load balancing for energy-efficient SNIC-Host cooperative computing. So recently the speeds in data center networks have continued to increase, which force server CPUs to spend more time processing packets. So because of this, a lot of hardware manufacturers have started to provide smart NICs, or SNICs as I may refer to them as. And the hope here is that they can improve the system-wide energy efficiency by offloading tasks to the more efficient accelerators and processors integrated onto the NIC. However, a lot of server-class processors also include various on-chip accelerators, so the smart NIC's advantage is somewhat uncertain. So to investigate this, we compare a state-of-the-art server CPU with a state-of-the-art smart NIC and find 2 major observations. So one, we see that the server processor actually outperforms the SNIC processors in terms of throughput and latency and energy efficiency as well. However, the SNIC can actually outperform the host in terms of energy efficiency under tail latency constraints, but only at low packet rates. So based on these observations, we propose HAL, which is a hardware-assisted load balancer that limits the rate of packets that are forwarded to the SNIC while sending the remaining packets to the host processor to be handled. So for some context, let's look at the NVIDIA BlueField-2, which is a state-of-the-art CPU-based SNIC. So the BlueField-2 integrates several general-purpose ARM CPU cores, some DRAM memory, and various accelerators. So these include things like regular expression matching, cryptography, and compression. And the hope here is that applications can offload tasks to the SNIC to save energy. Yeah. So to compare against the SNIC, we look at a Intel Xeon Skylake CPU. And the CPU has an integrated on-chip quick assist technology. So Intel QAT is a set of accelerators designed for mainly cryptography and compression tasks. And additionally, most of the functionality supported by the BlueField accelerators are also supported either by the Intel ISA or the QAT. So using the setup, we can compare 2 state-of-the-art SNICs and host processors. And to do our evaluation, we use 10 DPDK-based network functions. We choose DPDK since it's been used in is a widely adopted stack for intra-data center networking. And we select these functions based on a compilation of various prior SNIC studies. And these applications include a mix of ones that run purely on the CPU and certain functions that make use of hardware accelerators. And these functions also include both stateful and stateless functions. So first we can look at the throughput and latency of the host and SNIC processor. And we can see that in general, for most applications, the SNIC only achieves a fraction of the throughput and has significantly higher tail latency. There are a few exceptions. So for example, some of the applications like regular expression matching and compression that make use of accelerators can outperform the host processor. But in general, especially for purely CPU functions, the host processor is significantly better. And then we can also extend this to look at power efficiency. First, we can see that the SNIC's power consumption is very low compared to the total server power consumption. So what this just means is that the energy efficiency is really just dominated by the throughput that it achieves. So because of this, using just the host processor actually offers like more than 70% better energy efficiency. So based on these observations, the SNIC does not appear to be very efficient or useful for most of these functions. But there may be cases where the SNIC is helpful. So to look at this, we take two representative functions. So one is regular expression matching, which leverages some accelerators, and the other one, network address translation, runs purely on the CPU. And here we sweep the incoming traffic rate for these functions, and we can see that under a certain traffic rate, so around somewhere between 30 to 40 Gbps, depending on the application, the SNIC actually offers the same latency and throughput, but does so with noticeably less power. So based on this, at these low packet rates, we can actually see better energy efficiency, more than like 30% better energy efficiency. So this motivates the need for some type of load balancing within the SNIC to direct only the appropriate amount of traffic to the SNIC and let the host process any excess traffic. So to do this, we propose HAL, which is a hardware-assisted load balancer. And HAL consists of three main components integrated into the SNIC. So first is the traffic monitor. So this inspects incoming packets to determine the network traffic rate. Then we also have the traffic director, which uses a forwarding threshold that we set in our load balancing policy. And based on that, it modifies the MAC and IP header fields in the packets to direct them to either the host or SNIC CPU. And these Bluefield smart NICs include an embedded switch, so it's able to automatically direct packets to the appropriate processor based on the packet headers. And then additionally, there's also a traffic merger. So for outgoing packets, we basically adjust the header fields and checksums to ensure the client machines view this as coming from a single logical machine. And then finally, there is also a there's also a load balancing policy that we run on one of the CPU cores. So this load balancing policy is basically setting the forwarding rate to ensure the appropriate amount of traffic is being sent to the SNIC. And we do this by observing the throughput that the SNIC is achieving, and as well as the RxQ occupancy for the NIC. So essentially, when this SNIC's throughput approaches our forwarding threshold, we look at the RxQ occupancies. And if the RxQs are either above or below some watermark, that implies that we're either over or underutilizing the SNIC. So based on this, we can increment the forwarding threshold by some step. So this helps ensure that so this dynamically, based on the application performance, helps us ensure that we're sending the right amount of traffic to the SNIC to maintain our energy efficiency and our tail latency constraints. So here we evaluate HAL at various packet rates for some representative applications. And here we can see HAL is the yellow line, and the blue line is just using the host processor alone. And we can see that for a given traffic rate, they both achieve the same throughput and the same tail latency. But the yellow line is significantly lower in power. So this shows we can get like 20 to 30% better energy efficiency by using HAL than just using our host processor. So then to evaluate on more realistic traffic workloads, so we try to capture the bursty nature of data center traffic. And to do this, we use some CDFs from Meta for various workloads, including Cache, Web, and Hadoop. And we use these CDFs to generate packet traces following a log normal distribution. And we have our client machines replay these traces. So we can use these traffic traces to evaluate on some more workloads. And here we can see that HAL can actually marginally improve the throughput and P99 latency while still offering more than 20% better energy efficiency. And this is because HAL is able to leverage both the host processor and the SNIC at the same time in these traffic bursts. So up till this point, we have discussed only stateless functions because we are arbitrarily forwarding messages to either the host or SNIC. But to support stateful functions, we propose using a Compute Express Link or CXL-based SNIC. So CXL would offer a cache-coherent shared memory between the host and the SNIC. So no commercially available CXL SNICs exist, so we emulate one using methodologies that have been used in prior works. So we do this using a dual-socket NUMA system. So one socket acts as the host CPU, and the other socket acts as the SNIC processor. So in that node, we set it to the lowest frequency and only use 8 of the cores to model the lower compute capability but better energy efficiency of the SNIC. And then finally, the Intel UPI interconnect between the two sockets emulates the CXL interconnect. So using this, we can evaluate HAL for stateful workloads as well. And here we see a similar trend. The HAL is still able to offer marginally higher throughput and tail latency while still getting 20 to 30% better energy efficiency for these stateful functions. So finally, to conclude, we compare a state-of-the-art SNIC with a host processor and find that the SmartNICs can improve system-wide energy efficiency, but only under low packet rates. So to solve this, we propose a seamless SNIC-Host cooperating by using hardware-based load balancing within the SNIC. And we do this by limiting the rate of packets that are sent to the SNIC processors and letting the host processors handle the remaining packets. And based on our evaluation, we were able to show that HAL offers up to 31% better system-wide energy efficiency and improved throughput by up to 10%, all while not compromising on the tail latency. So thank you all for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions. So while people are lining up, my question is that for the CXL part, so how you envision the CXL will be connected system? Is it like directly connected to the SmartNIC card, or is it a host side thing?
So most likely would be So most likely would be like some similar form factor to PCI devices, just would be a CXL instead. So that's the general approach for CXL we're seeing.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? So maybe I'll ask another one. So I think for the, like you have different goals, different metrics. Like you want both the host and also the SmartNIC well utilized. And also there's some energy efficiency prereference for different like traffic or different packet rate. So is there any conflict? Like does your policy needs to balance between these metrics?
Yeah, so that's the goal with the, so basically the load balancing policy is looking at the throughput and the RxQ occupancy, right? So basically, if the application characteristics change, like the application is able to only handle a lower packet rate, we'll dynamically adjust the forwarding threshold. So that should ensure that the SNIC is being utilized at the appropriate amount.
So it's kind of like you are saying prefer utilization over the energy efficiency, right? You still want them to have the performance as the...
Yeah, so really the assumption is that so really all we're targeting is making sure we send as much traffic to the SNIC as possible without compromising the latency. Okay. And by doing that, we get the energy efficiency advantage because the SNIC is more energy efficient.
You have a latency like threshold or something.
Yeah,
right?
So that's what the RxQ occupancy captures if the queues are building up and increasing latency.
Okay, if there's no more questions, let's thank the speaker again. Okay, thank you. Okay, for the second talk, this will be NDPBridge, like working on enabling cross-bank coordination in Near-DRAM-Bank processing architecture. The speaker will be Boyu Tian, which is a PhD student actually from my group, from Tsinghua University. So he's in his 4th year, and his research interest is mostly on near data processing memory architecture, as he will talk about. So let's welcome the speaker.
Thanks for the introduction from my advisor. I'm Boyu from Tsinghua University, and I'm very happy to share our work, NDPBridge, enabling cross-bank coordination in near-DRAM-Bank processing architectures. Well, near data processing is one of the promising paradigms to optimize memory access cost. By moving computing logic near data, the memory accesses can be done with lower latency, lower energy consumption, and higher bandwidth. And there are now various memory technologies to realize NDP, including adding compute logics to the logic layer of the 3D stacked memories, to the buffer chip of DDR DIMMs, or to inside the DRAM banks. In this work, we focus on DRAM-Bank-based near-data processing. The DRAM-Bank NDP systems, it adds computing logics inside or near DRAM banks. It usually has fine granularity, high aggregated memory bandwidth, and high parallelism. It usually contains hundreds to thousands of units in the system. Well, it has been widely studied not only in academia, but also in industry. Typical industry products include UM-PIM, UM-PIM from Samsung, and AIM from SK Hynix. In this work, our baseline architecture is similar to UM-PIM. However, there are still several limitations of DRAM-Bank NDP. The first one is that in DRAM-Bank NDP, the banks are isolated from each other. Each unit can only access data stored locally. Well, we call this data local execution paradigm. In the example here, we show a tree traversal application, and the communication between the two units that contains different nodes are done through the host CPU forwarding. The results of one tree node processing must be retrieved by the host CPU and then forwarded to the next unit targeting another tree node. This back and forth transfer incurs about 30% performance overhead, and we cannot add physical links directly between banks to solve the two issues because it would incur expensive modifications and it is severely restricted by the DRAM technology. And the second limitation is load imbalance. This hurts the performance and scalability of the system. Well, since there are usually thousands of units in the system, static assignment by programmer is very hard, and it cannot work with dynamic applications such as tree traversal. In this figure, we show the gap between the average execution time among all the units and the peak execution time to demonstrate the load imbalance. And dynamic load balancing, such as work stealing, is not supported in previous work because it first will require a cross-bank transfer of computation workload and is poorly supported. And as we'll show later, the data local execution will make the scheduling even challenging when after we support the communication. So in this work, we propose hardware-software co-design to alleviate the two issues. We first adopt a task-based message passing programming model to provide appropriate encapsulation for both computation and communication. And then we propose a communication scheme called using bridges, and it utilizes existing physical links and without altering DRAM form factors. On the basis of that, we design a data transfer-aware scheduling policy. So first, let's take a look at the task-based model. We adopt a model similar to existing work, and in our work, a task is the basic unit for execution and scheduling. In the tree traversal example, a task is the processing of one tree node. And tasks can spawn child tasks dynamically, so the processing of the child node can be generated by the processing of parent node. And there are mainly two differences of our model than previous work. The first one is that each task is only associated with only one data element. This aligns well with the data local execution paradigm. And second, for applications where one task is associated with multiple data elements, the communication is done through the host through pushing tasks by message passing instead of pulling data. We follow the NDP philosophy to design such task model. So here is an overview of our architecture. There are several DRAM DIMMs in the system. Each contains multiple DRAM ranks, and inside each rank, there is a buffer chip and several NDP units. The general idea of communication in our work is done in a gather-scatter manner. We incorporate logics inside the buffer chip, and we name it the bridge. The bridge, for a message targeting another unit in the rank, it is first gathered to the buffer chip or the bridge, and it is scattered to the target unit in the rank. So in this way, the cross-bank communication is done inside the rank and the result transfer back and forth to this whole CPU. And for messages targeting units in another rank, we incorporate another level of bridges. All our modifications are confined to NDP units and the buffer chip, which are both standalone modules and may have already been modified in existing NDP products. All the physical links and pins remains unaltered. So here is our detailed hardware components in the system. We will introduce them as we introduce the overall workflow. First, our architecture follows a task-based execution. NDP core can fetch a task to execute when it's idle, and it can also store messages targeting another unit to the mailbox region. The message gathering is done a gather command. it is essentially a DDR read command with a special address field. So the unit will detect it is a gather command, and it will return messages in the mailbox region instead of a normal data read. The messages will be sent through the original DQ links to the bridges and will be stored temporarily for further transfer. The message scattering is done through a DDR write command with a special address field. So the messages will be sent through the bridges to the NDP units and will be handled by the unit controller for further process. There is another state gather command for the bridges to gather state information of units such as task queue length and mailbox length. Well, notice that such procedures happens in parallel with all the units in the system, similar to normal DDR accesses. And for the load balancing, it also follows the gather-scatter workflow. When we need to initiate a load balancing, the bridge will find a hot unit. We call it a task giver. It sends a schedule command to it, which is essentially a DDR activate command with a special address field. Then the task giver will prepare tasks to be landed out, and the tasks will be gathered through the gather command to the bridges. And then the bridges will find an idle unit we call the task receiver, and the messages for schedule will be sent through the scatter command to the receiver. So now we have introduced the basic workflow of load balancing, but it is not enough because, as we will show here, in the original shared memory architecture, we only need to transfer tasks to do load balancing because all the units can access the data freely and in roughly the same performance. However, in our architecture, the communication is done in a message passing manner. This means that we only transferring tasks is not enough because it cannot access data stored in other unit. So the data should be also transferred along with the task using the same message passing procedure. So this means that during this data transfer time, the scheduling is not yet effective, and the receiver unit remains idle. So we should consider this data transfer time in our scheduling policy design, and this calls for data transfer aware scheduling policy. So we propose 3 optimization goals and corresponding design. The first one is to hide the transfer latency. So in the figure here, the 2 green bars shows the execution time on 2 units. Well, traditionally, we run load balancing when the receiver unit runs idle. This will incur this wait time for the data transfer, and it's shown by the orange bar. Well, in this work, we try to schedule the tasks in advance to overlap the transfer latency, and the scheduling threshold is estimated dynamically using runtime information. And second, we try to avoid transfer congestion. Well, traditionally, we steal half of the victim queue length to the receiver, but it will incur too long wait time because we schedule too much tasks. So in our work, we use fine-grained scheduling and only transfer a small amount of tasks each time. And third, we try to reduce transfer traffic through better selecting which tasks to land out. Well, for the data traffic, there are 2 parts. The first one is the data and then the tasks. So in the example here, if we want to schedule 3 tasks, a bad choice is to schedule 3 cold data elements which only associated with one task. But if we try to find a hot data element associated with 3 tasks, we only need to transfer 1 data block for 3 tasks. So in our work, we use a sketch-based solution to filter hot data. The sketch is the data structure widely used in network measurement to use a small storage to efficiently and approximately filter hot data blocks in a data stream. So here, we use a sketch to filter hot data with many tasks. These tasks are stored separately in a reserved queue and will be prioritized for scheduling. Here is our methodology for evaluation, and we simulate our system using ZSIM. There are 512 units in the system, and we first evaluate the bridge-based communication against the host CPU forwarding-based communication scheme. And on the basis of that, we evaluate our data transfer-aware scheduling policy. We implement 8 representative applications using our task-based model. Here is our results. the figure on the left is the overall execution time. And as we can see here, the bridge-based communication achieves 1.51 times speed up than the CPU forwarding-based communication. And we also measure the time, the idle wait time, which is a gap between the peak end-to-end execution time and the actual computation time. So it is shown in the red figure, and the bridge-based communication reduced the idle wait time from 32% to 1.4%. But it's still, these two designs still suffer load imbalance. So further add work stealing will lead to 1.45 times speed up than no scheduling design. But as we can see in the right figure, the more communication are incurred because we need to transfer more data and tasks. And the idle wait time becomes to 18.6%. So finally, our data transfer aware scheduling policy achieves the best performance, which is nearly 3 times speed up than the host CPU forwarding. And as we can see in the red figure, the idle wait time reduces from 18% to only 10%. Well, as a summary, the lack of the communication support and load balancing support hinders the adoption of DRAM-Bank NDP architecture, and we propose a series of hardware-software co-design to alleviate the two issues. Well, thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
OK, please.
Hi, I'm Socrates from Cornell University, and I have a question for you. What's the area overhead of this NDP bridge?
OK, thanks for your question. Well, it's actually a very important part of our design. The area overhead is only some logics for generating the commands and the storage for temporarily storing the messages. So as we'll show, you can refer to the paper to say that the area overhead is only less than 2% of the original buffer chip and NP units. Well, actually, it's again, it is very important to reduce the area overhead.
OK, thanks.
Hi, this is Cecilio from Cornell. I saw that in your methodology you're using ZSIM to simulate this. So I was wondering whether the way you're simulating it is assuming it's like a conventional system and there's nothing like particularly PIM about it, or whether you actually modify the simulator to accurately reflect, everything end to end, the interaction with the PIM side and everything.
Well, I'm not sure I totally get your question. Is that we modify the DSIM inside the DSIM to simulate the whole system?
Yeah, and whether whether the PIM are like individual nodes that you're simulating within ZSIM, individual cores, or how is it done?
Okay. Yes. So we simulate each NDP unit as one node, and inside each node there is a very wimpy core for NDP core and local memory. So all the units are very similar to a NUMA system, but there are a very large amount of NUMA nodes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Marco, I'm from Brazil, and I have a question. Have you considered the DRAM commands to open the rows and all the stuff there? Because I was thinking, how do you deal with the migration of when you do the work stealing, and how do you control the commands from the DRAM banks?
Okay. Thanks for your question. It's a very good question because when we migrate the task and data, we just use the message passing procedure is like in the slides. So we just need to read the messages from the like the original DRAM banks and the messages are stored in the bank, and then write again to the another DRAM unit. So the control of the DDR commands are done inside the units. We add a controller. Well, it's essentially a lock to coordinate the accesses from both the NDP units and the bridges. Does this answer your question?
Yeah. And how do you handle the comments that are coming from the CPU and together with the comments that you are generating there?
Okay, in this work, we do not do the hybrid computing from both CPU and the NDP, so we do not need to handle the like instruction from the CPU, and it's also not supported in the original UM-PIM. When the PIM execution begins, the CPU is like stalled and wait for the results, so we did not consider it. But it may be an interesting future work for us to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, time's up. Okay, so the next one is from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. So the speaker is Yilong Zhao. He's a PhD student since 2022 advised by Professor Jiang. His research interest is also lies in this processing memory architectures. So this talk will be about, well, the slide is not, it's about the communication and also the data layout and the interleave stuff in the UM-PIM in the processing memory architecture. Okay, let's welcome the speaker.
Zhao Yilong from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. I will present our work, UM-PIM. UM-PIM is to address the incompatibility between PIM and memory interleaving. With the emergence of LLMs, the token is getting longer and require more memory bandwidth. While DRAM memory bandwidth is limited by its hierarchical organization. The bank shares interface and memory bus, so only one bank can be activated at the same time. In other words, the interface constrains the bandwidth and results in a memory wall between CPU and DRAM. PIM is to solve this problem by integrating PIM units inside DRAM to better utilize the internal bandwidth. Memory interleaving is to increase CPU bandwidth. Adjacent cache lines are mapped to different channels, so they can be accessed in parallel. Memory interleaving is implemented with address mapping. The DRAM hierarchies have different switch overheads, so we can map the higher order base of address to the levels with high switch overhead, so we can get a better bandwidth. Well, the memory interleaving can make PIM inefficient. Suppose PIM compute on this block of data. The data is divided into pages and interleaved between the device. So PIM can only visible to incontiguous bytes. In one offload, PIM can only compute on 1 byte because they don't know the second byte's location. And in the second offload, they compute with the second bytes. So this task needs many offloads. In each offload, CPU needs to transfer the context and pull for PIM's finishing. So it's microseconds of overhead. Well, PIM only compute on 1 byte, so it's nanoseconds computation time. The offload time is much more than the task time, and it's inefficient. PIM's ideal address mapping is to map a contiguous data block to the same device, so we only need one offload for the task. Accordingly, the address mapping for this mapping is to map according to hierarchy levels, and this mapping is totally different from CPU's interleaved mapping. To ensure the PIM efficiency, current PIM system isolates a dedicated PIM space from the main memory. The PIM space is accessed through physical address and is not interleaved. When doing a computation, for example, a LP layer, CPU first reduces the result from the last layer and then transfer the data to the PIM space. Then PIM do the computation and results are moved back. So we introduce 2 data transfer in step 3 and 5. Moreover, the 2 memory space have different data layouts, so we need to relay out the data during the transfer. According to the previous work, for some tasks, the transfer dominates the computed time for about 90%. This system also switches off the channel and rank interleaving to save the relay-out computations. But because the interleaving is switched off, so the CPU bandwidth is damaged. And even with this measure, the relay-out overhead still accounts for 70% of data transfer time. This is a summary. With single data layout in memory space, we can't achieve CPU performance, low offload overhead, and low data transfer overhead concurrently. So the key is to break the single data layout in memory space, and we can achieve all the 3. This is our motivation. UM-PIM have a uniform memory space with CPU and PIM pages with different data layout coexisting in the space. So we do not need to data transfer. There are 3 challenges for the implementation. The first one is the coexistence of CPU's virtual memory and PIM's contiguous data block. The second challenge is PIM page and CPU page have different data layout. The third challenge is PIM page is not interleaved, so when CPU access PIM page, the bandwidth is low, so we need to accelerate this. This is our design. We propose 3 techniques for the 3 challenges. The principle of our method is the hardware modification is only on DRAM side, so it's compatible with current CPU systems. For the first challenge, we propose a chunk-based management for CPU page. When we want to allocate a PIM page, we allocate a huge page named chunk. We turn on the memory interleaving and let the huge page large enough so the higher order bits are mapped to rows. So the chunk is distributed on all the devices. This means that we allocate a PIM page for each PIM. Inside the PIM page, the address is not interleaved. So this needs our second technique. This is the second technique to solve the different data layouts in PIM and CPU page. We divide the problem into 3 sub-problems according to hierarchy levels. The first level is above the bank. We use an existing method. We add address alias to the memory controller and set to the 2 different address mapping. Note that device level is not addressable for memory controller, so we do this in the second level. The second level is for device row and column. We add 2 hardware models in DRAM side, which is RCL and ATM. Suppose we have allocated some chunk and the chunk number is stored in RCL. When we access this address, we extract the chunk number from it and compare it with those in RCL. If it hits its PIM page, and we use the ATM to convert the address. Otherwise, it's CPU page, and we bypass ATM. The third level is inside the cache line. This problem is the PIM page cache line is not equal to the burst. The PIM page cache line is on the same device, while a DRAM burst is across the devices. And this is decided by hardware. We add a hardware module RC to solve this. Suppose we access this cache line from device 2. In the first cycle, we load a burst into the RC, which are these bytes. And in the second burst, we load the second burst. After 8 burst time, we load all these bytes in RC. And we extract these bytes from device 2 and put it to the memory bus. However, although RC can automatically do the data layout, but it's not efficient because we still need 8 burst time for one cache line. This is because the cache line is on the same device and we cannot change that. So we proposed a software and hardware co-design method for it. Suppose we have access this cache line and we need 8 bursts. We load many redundant bytes in the RC. So in the next access, if we access those that are already loaded in RC, we only need 1 burst time. So we can choose a proper loop order to better utilize the redundant bytes that loaded in RC. This figure shows the performance of all gather with different loop order. This loop order can better utilize the redundant bytes, so they have a good performance. We evaluate UM-PIM with unmapped DPU and Jing-5 simulator for CPU overhead. The baseline is current PIM system with isolated memory space. The benchmark can be divided into CPU workloads and PIM workloads. For CPU workloads, current PIM system have 22% performance degradation because of memory interleaving is switched off, while UM-PIM have negligible performance loss because CPU page is interleaved. For PIM workloads, UM-PIM have 1.96 speed up compared to current PIM system because we eliminate the data transfer between CPU and PIM space. For workload with intensive inter-PIM units data transfer, current PIM system cannot benefit from the more PIM units, but UM-PIM can still benefit from more PIM units because our data transfer overhead is low. For PIM compilers, UM-PIM can offload more program segments because our data transfer overhead is low. This is discussion. Our method can be extended to different device number of DRAM and different DRAM type. HBM and LPDDR do not have device level, so the problem is just a sub-problem of our method present on DDR. You can find the details of instruction support and software in our paper. This is the conclusion. UM-PIM have uniform and shared memory space and fast and transparent data layout. And more importantly, our UM-PIM is compatible with current CPU system because there's no hardware modification on CPU side. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Marco. So how do you deal with the memory cache coherence problem there? Do you have a coherence there in your simulation infrastructure?
Memory cache?
Yes, the coherence. How do you make it? Whenever you're changing the DRAM, you need to invalidate cache lines, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
If PIM want to compute, CPU needs to flush the cache line to ensure that the data have a load in DRAM.
Okay, yeah, but have you simulated this time to the invalidation? Because it seems to me that if you invalidate a lot of lines there, then you will lose all the performance that you get from PIM, right?
We simulate that time.
Okay, and how many lines do you need to invalidate whenever you want to do one single operation inside the RAM? Just for...
That depends on the data transfer size.
Okay, so thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so time's up, so let's thank the speakers again. Okay, so the fourth talk will be from Nika Mansouri Ghiasi, who is a PhD student in NDPBridge, advised by Professor Onomutlu. And her research interest lies in near data processing with a special focus on bioinformatics, storage system, and ultra-dense 3D integrated systems. So I believe she will tell us about their work about the combination of geomic acceleration and in-storage processing. So let's welcome the speaker.
Okay, hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about MegIS, high performance, energy efficient, and low cost metagenomic analysis with in-storage processing. Here's the outline of my talk. I will start with a brief background on metagenomics. Metagenomics is the study of genome sequences of diverse organisms within a shared environment. And it overcomes the limitations of traditional genomics because it bypasses the need for analyzing individual species in isolation, which is not feasible in many use cases, such as the ones involving analyzing complex microbial communities like in human gut, soil, or ocean. Because of that, metagenomics has led to groundbreaking advances in many fields, such as precision medicine, understanding microbial diversity of environments, or discovering early warning signs of communicable diseases. Since the species in a metagenomic sample are not known in advance, metagenomic analysis typically involves performing several tasks that leads to a deeper understanding of the composition of the sample. So I'm going to start here by showing the DNA sequences in the sample. And the first step, preparation of input queries. Many metagenomic analysis tools extract k-mers, which are subsequences of length k, out of the organism's genomes. And in the second step, presence-absence identification, metagenomic analysis tools identify the species that are present in the sample by looking up these query k-mers against a large database containing information on many species. And these databases can actually be very large, more than 100 terabytes in some emerging examples. At the end of this step, we have the IDs of the species that are identified to be present in the sample. And the third optional step of abundance estimation finds the relative frequencies of occurrences of these steps, these species. Yeah. So since metagenomic analysis requires accessing large amounts of data that are residing in the storage system, in our work we perform a case study to analyze the performance of metagenomic systems on various state-of-the-art SSDs. And here I'm normalizing the throughput compared to a case with hypothetical case with zero I/O overhead, and show that for both performance-optimized and cost-optimized SSDs, I/O data movement causes significant overhead for metagenomic analysis. And further analysis shows that this I/O overhead becomes even larger for systems in which other bottlenecks, such as computation and main memory, get alleviated. So addressing this I/O overhead due to moving large amounts of low reuse data is hard to avoid, is very challenging. One might think it might be possible to shrink this database size using some sampling techniques, but that reduces accuracy to levels that would be unacceptable to many use cases. Or another potential solution might seem to be keeping all data required by metagenomic analysis completely and always in main memory, but such solution is energy inefficient, costly, unscalable, and unsustainable due to two reasons. First, is that database sizes increase rapidly in size, although already they're very large, they're also growing very fast. So for example, in many cases, they double every few months. And regardless of individual database sizes, different analysis can require accessing different databases that contain information on various sets of the species or different sets of parameters. So motivated by these points, our goal in this work is to improve metagenomic analysis performance by reducing data movement overhead from storage system in a cost-effective manner and with high accuracy. So in storage processing can be a promising direction to achieve this goal by processing data directly inside the storage system. But none of the existing approaches to metagenomic analysis can be directly used inside the SSD due to limitations of SSD's hardware, such as long latency of NAND flash chips or small DRAM capacity inside the SSD or small DRAM bandwidth for this DRAM inside the SSD. So in this work, we introduced MegIS, which is the first in-storage processing system for end-to-end metagenomic analysis. And its idea is to enable cooperative in-storage processing for metagenomics, which is enabled by hardware-software co-design between the storage system and the host system. So let's quickly see a brief overview of MegIS's steps. So the first step is preparation of input queries. Second step is presence-absence identification. And the third step, which is optional, is abundance estimation. To effectively leverage and coordinate resources inside and outside the SSD to effectively run these steps, we perform hardware-software co-design in 5 different directions. First one is task partitioning and mapping, so that we ensure that each part runs in the system which is most suitable for it. So in our work, we map step 1 in the host system and step 2 and 3 in the storage system, and we will discuss in more details why in the next slides. Second is data and computation flow coordination to reduce the communication overhead between these parts that are mapping in different systems. Third is the storage of our algorithms to ensure efficient access patterns to the SSD. Fourth, lightweight and storage accelerators to minimize SRAM and DRAM buffer space needed in the hardware-constrained SSD environment. And finally, data mapping schema and flash translation layer, which are optimized based on access patterns and metagenomic analysis. So now let's see how these concepts are used within different steps of MegIS. Let's take a closer look at step 1. So in step 1, preparation of input queries. So since MegIS employs sorted data structures to avoid expensive random accesses to the SSD, to prepare the input queries, we extract gamers from them and sort them. We decide to execute this step inside the host system because it benefits from larger DRAM available in the host and more computation resources, and also because of this larger DRAM, it incurs fewer writes to the NAND flash chips. And also, running it in a host system enables overlapping step 1 with the step 2, as we will see, which, as we will see, will be executed in the storage system. So to execute this step efficiently in the host system, we need to ensure 2 things. First is that we need to avoid significant data movement overhead between the partitions. And second, we should minimize performance and lifetime overheads, even for scenarios that the host DRAM cannot contain all the extracted gamers. So to this end, we design an input processing scheme that after extracting gamers, it divides them into independent partitions based on their alphabetic range. And that enables overlapping operations that are performed in these independent partitions. For example, in this case, sorting in step 1 for one partition can be overlapped with data transfer and in storage processing operations in the previous independent partition. So now let's take a brief look at step 2. So step 2, in this step, MegIS finds the species that are present in a sample by first identifying the common k-mers between query k-mers and database k-mers, and second, by retrieving the IDs of the species that are represented by these k-mers. So MegIS executes this step in the storage system because it accesses large amounts of data with low reuse, so the earlier we analyze it, the better. And second, it involves only lightweight computation. To execute this step efficiently in the SSD, MegIS needs to leverage full internal bandwidth of the SSD effectively without requiring expensive hardware resources in the SSD. So when identifying the common k-mers, relying solely on SSD's internal DRAM to buffer the database k-mers that are arriving from the SSD NAND flash channels at full bandwidth, and query k-mers that are arriving from the host system and buffering the intermediate result for the next step, all of this can pressure the limited internal bandwidth of the DRAM inside the SSD. To address this challenge, we adopt an approach to directly perform computation on NAND flash data streams. So this approach avoids the need for buffering in the DRAM, but it still needs buffers for each channel. Therefore, we minimize the required buffer spaces for each channel based on features of in-storage processing steps in MegIS, and that would enable MegIS to perform direct operations on NAND flash data streams using only 2 registers for sizes of k-mers for each channel, so that reduces hardware cost of MegIS significantly. And then finally, we write these common k-mers to the host DRAM to be analyzed in the next step. So MegIS retrieves the species IDs of these common k-mers by looking at some sketch databases that store some sketches or unique k-mers of different species and their IDs. So when the number of species that we want to encode in this sketch data structure increases, this approach becomes space inefficient. Therefore, there are various other approaches to encode this sketch information in a more space efficient manner. But these approaches require performing many pointer tracing operations for each lookup, which becomes very expensive and slow inside the SSD due to long latency of NAND flash chips. So specialized to constraints of in-storage processing, in our work, we introduce an intermediate approach, which we refer to as k-mer sketches streaming. This approach allows just streaming through these k-mer sketches to identify the species IDs. And it is significantly smaller than the baseline approach, but it is still larger than the most compact solutions. But we find it a better fit for in-storage processing paradigm because of its more suitable streaming access patterns. So more details about the design of this is in the paper, and similarly, more details about design of step 3 and MegIS FTL can be found in the paper. So now let me go through the evaluation. We model performance, energy, and power of system based on latency, throughput, and power of hardware-based and software-based components. And we analyze the following baselines: performance-optimized software, accuracy-optimized software, and PIM hardware-accelerated tool that uses processing in memory to further accelerate the performance-optimized baseline. And we run these baselines on systems equipped with state-of-the-art cost-optimized and performance-optimized SSDs. And we analyze it for metagenomic task of finding species present in a metagenomic sample with samples with varying degrees of genetic diversity. So here I'm showing speed up over the software baseline for a cost-optimized SSD. And we show that for both performance-optimized and accuracy-optimized baselines, MegIS leads to larger speed ups. And then when we repeat also this experiment with performance-optimized SSDs, we also make the same observation. We also evaluate MegIS compared to the PIM hardware baseline. I show that for both cost-optimized and performance-optimized SSDs, MegIS leads to large speed-ups. And here in this figure, I'm showing a reduction in energy consumption and average across different input sets and SSDs. And we show that MegIS leads to large energy reduction compared to these different baselines. And it provides these benefits while achieving high accuracy. So its accuracy is similar to the accuracy-optimized baseline. And as also analysis shows, it is significantly higher than the performance-optimized baseline and the PIM hardware. And all these benefits are achieved in MegIS with low area overhead and small power consumption. So we also analyzed the impact of MegIS on improving system cost efficiency. So we're considering 2 systems: a cost-optimized system with cost-optimized SSD and 64 GB of DRAM, and a performance-optimized system with performance-optimized SSD and 1 TB of DRAM. And we run the baselines on the cost-optimized system and performance-optimized systems. And we're comparing MegIS's performance when running on a cost-optimized system. We observed that it not only outperforms the baselines when they both consider similar hardware, similar systems, but it even outperforms the baselines when running on a much less costly system. So we conclude that MegIS improves system cost efficiency, which we hope it would make accurate metagenomics more accessible for its wider adoption. So there are many other results in the paper, which I would like to refer you to it if you're interested. And now I very briefly conclude by providing a summary. So metagenomic analysis suffers from large I/O overhead. And in our work, we propose MegIS to improve performance, energy efficiency of metagenomic analysis while achieving high accuracy and incurring, and all of that would incur small area overhead and power consumption. So thank you so much for listening. I'd be happy to take questions.
Let me first start with one. I see you compare with the PIM baseline. Is that like a processing in memory baseline? Or is it just like in-memory like computation, like traditional way?
Yeah, so it uses processing memory using a DRAM array.
Okay.
So it uses that to perform k-mer lookups against the database.
So why is the in-SSD computation faster than the PIM one? Like, is it the bandwidth higher or?
The PIM baseline still would need to bring the data that is residing in the storage system to the memory. So whereas in the case of MegIS, but we are accessing NAND flash chips already, the throughput of computation can be overlapped with throughput of just reading the data. So
okay, so it's basically it's still from the storage data,
yep.
so it's bounded by okay.
Hi, Cecilia from Cornell. I saw very quickly in one of your slides that you also compared against, just doing it in the internal CPUs of the FTL. And I was wondering how much of a legroom these CPUs have, considering that they're already doing a bunch of things. So have you been able to analyze that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in reality, these cores are not fully utilized and they have some underutilization, but specific to the case of MegIS, during in-storage processing step, we do not perform writes. Therefore, a lot of the management tasks that would keep these cores busy would not need to be able to happen. And also other mechanisms that would ensure correctness, like read counts or disturbances. Since again, the duration of in-storage processing in MegIS is very short, they can happen either before or after that. So basically not relying on these cores to be heavily involved is what enables us to do computation on that. And also more details about how other management tasks would be performed in the SSDR in the paper, which I would like to refer you to.
I loved it. Congratulations. Great work.
Thanks.
Thank you for a great talk. I'm Boyu from Tsinghua University. I would like to ask that it's a very general question. What are the attitudes of the maybe like biomedicine, or what are the attitudes of using a domain-specific accelerator? Do they prefer using a general purpose general purpose cores because the workload may be changing fastly? What are the attitudes?
I see. So there are 2 points to think about here. So I first address the workload changing fast. So they do, but there are some common primitives that are fundamental to these genomic pipelines. So there's value in accelerating them, definitely. But then going back to the attitude in the community, so I do not have, of course, very wide scope, widespread encounters, but based on the encounters I have had so far, there is indeed resistance. That is why I think it would be a good contribution. Actually, I'm personally very interested into that as architects to make adoption of such approaches more easy, like by basically finding ways that would enable adopting several optimizations at once within one system, etc. So yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Let's thank the speaker again.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so the last but not least talk from University of Minnesota, which is about error correction on non-volatile processing memory architectures. The speaker will be Husrev Silason. So I hope I got it right, which is a fifth-year PhD student from University of Minnesota, advised by Ulia Kapsu. I hope I got the name right. Okay. So his research interest is including computer architecture, in-memory computing, and IC machines. And since he's the last year in his PhD, so he's also actively looking for jobs in both industry and the research universities. So let's welcome the speaker.
Hello, my name is Husrev, and I'm a member of a large team at the University of Minnesota working on spintronic devices and architectures. Today I'm going to talk about error correction for non-volatile processing in memory. So processing in memory, or PIM, has great potential for throughput, performance, and energy efficiency as long as a reliable operation can be guaranteed. Errors are inevitable in PIM systems, and they need to be detected and corrected timely to ensure reliable operation. So PIM systems inherit memory errors, but they also introduce computation-induced errors. due to frequent data updates in memory, which is happening directly in memory, actually, and which challenge traditional solutions for memory errors. Typical memory error correction solutions are not optimized for dynamically changing data, and therefore there's a need for a PIM-specific error correction. So as PIM spans a rich design space, we can define two classes of PIM depending on where exactly the computations are happening. So the first class is the near memory computing, where computation happens outside but nearby the memory array. And the second class computes directly within the memory array, which renders a very high arithmetic intensity, as the data does not need to leave the memory array for computation. This in turn results in very frequent dynamic data updates in the memory, which tightens the budget for error correction. And in our work, we focus on this more challenging problem. So as the PIM solutions, the directly in-memory PIM solutions also span a very rich design space. Without loss of generality, we focus on non-volatile spintronic processing in memory as a case study. Here, any cell in the same row along the same row can act as an input or an output to a logic gate operation, and forming a logic gate takes configuring bit select lines and word lines of the control lines to form a resistive network of inputs and outputs. So let me walk you through the formation of a NOR gate. After forming the resistive network, we need to preset the output to a known gate-specific value. When we apply gate-specific voltage, which is V NOR in this case, subsequently across this resistive network over the bit lines, we can change the logic value of the output cell according to the target case truth table. To be more specific, in spintronic memory, we can change the value of a cell by passing a current that is large enough, which is also called a switching current. So V-gate also induced a current through the input cells, as indicated by I out here. And the resistances here capture the logic states. Hence, the I out evolves as a function of the input logic states. Accordingly, I out may or may not suffice to switch the state of the output cell. Finally, as V-gate applies to bit lines and bit lines span across columns, we can only perform one gate at a time at a single row, but we can perform the same gate operation in all the rows in parallel. And we can also compute in multiple arrays at the same time. And as a result, we can actually perform excessively high amount of gates directly within the memory arrays. But unfortunately, each one of these operations are vulnerable to errors. And now, how do these errors look like? So the origins of errors are numerous, and they are also highly technology dependent. But bit films represents a good abstraction of to capture these errors at the end of the logic gate outputs. Yeah, so an error in the computation, which is a gate operation in a memory row, to be more specific, can happen anytime. By making use of the redundant information, which we call metadata here, we can detect and correct such errors in the PIM systems. Hence, we need to come up with a practical solution to update the metadata in memory, along with the actual computation, to keep track of the data updates due to the computation itself. So thereby, subsequent checks can use a formal function of the metadata to pinpoint the error location so that we can detect and correct the errors. So let's start with the metadata updates. PIM gate operations typically happen in one direction, in a parallel fashion. In this example, it's a row parallel. And we can keep the metadata in the same direction that the computation happens, which would be a column-wise metadata update, or we can do the same thing in the orthogonal direction, which would be the row-wise metadata update. Under column-wise scheme, metadata updates proceed simultaneously with the actual computation. So let's take a closer look. So this is what we have by definition. However, we don't compute the MD out using the output itself. MD out is actually computed directly using the MD ins. Formally, this is the definition of a homomorphic operation, which unfortunately is very expensive to compute in the memory. But in the row-wise scheme, on the other hand, it doesn't require homomorphism. In this case, we simply update the metadata along with each computation. Putting it all together, as the overhead for homomorphic data updates can easily become very excessive, considering the very high frequency of the dynamic data updates in memory, we base our design on row-wise and propose several hardware optimizations to rectify the throughput performance. Two broad classes of ECC designs we propose are based on Hamming codes and triple modular redundancy, which is TMR. They both guarantee single error protection, but we should also note that, as demonstrated in our paper, our framework can support stronger codes as well. So the significance of single error protection is that it is on par with reliability solutions for modern memory technologies, but for emerging technologies such as spintronic PIM, we are not there yet. We have to get there for practical adoption, and we are getting there according to the recent reports from the industry and the academic labs. So the next design parameter that we need to consider is the granularity of the error checks in time and space, both. So the finest option to perform these checks is the gate-level granularity, where we perform error checks after each gate. This guarantees that no error will propagate to later stages, but the issue is that this is considerably slow. And we can make it faster by performing the checks in the circuit-level granularity. And in this case, we still perform metadata updates after each gate, but we perform the error checks at the end. But also, I would like to note that the circuit level means basically it can correspond to any meaningful functional arithmetic block depending on our application. But the problem with this is that there can be multiple bit flips at the end, which potentially exceeds the capability of error protection mechanism. For example, if in the gate 1, if there's an error in the earlier stages of the computation, this can spread to gate 3 and gate 4 later before we have a chance to correct the errors, and this would potentially violate the single error protection guarantees that we would potentially have. And luckily, there's a sweet spot. We can perform ECC checks at the logic level granularity to prevent error propagation. As gates in the logic level are independent from each other, so are their metadata updates, which basically enables effective pipelining. As a result, this approach is almost as fast as the circuit granularity check at scale, however, without compromising the single error protection guarantees. So this is what we base our proposed designs on, and at the same time, while metadata updates happen in memory, we deploy several external checkers to prevent the errors in the error correction scheme itself. Our hardware design takes advantage of pipelining and similar latency hiding techniques to extensively maximize the throughput. And we compare our designs to unprotected PIM conservatively of the very same area budget. We also use representative PIM benchmarks of various problem sizes, which typically span multiple PIM arrays. We also synthesize external checker to quantitatively characterize its hardware overheads. So this figure captures the time overhead of our Hamming and TMR-based designs with respect to an unprotected PIM baseline, considering problems of various sizes and problem types on the x-axis. Overall, we observe that the time overhead remains modest, barely reaching 40%. This analysis is still conservative, though, as realistically, a practical error correction solution would be allowed to have a sizable area overhead compared to an unprotected PIM baseline. In line with the theoretical expectations, we also observe that the Hamming-based designs are more scalable than the TMR-based ones, thanks to the smaller metadata size. And in conclusion, PIM reliability is critical to unlock the energy efficiency potential, where frequent dynamic data updates render classical memory-only solutions infeasible. In this paper, we explored the error corrections design space for PIM and proposed several practical solutions with modest overhead. Our framework can support error correction codes of different strength that exceeds the capability of a single error protection, but they also apply to PIM systems computing directly in memory arrays. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I can address the questions next.
question, just go to the microphone.
Interesting talk, Ben Feinberg, Sandia National Labs. Can you comment on the energy overheads that you're seeing? So it's 40% on 40%. Can you comment on the energy overheads because that's going to be essential for an energy efficient system?
Yes, so energy overheads are excessively high in these scenarios because of the nature of the computation itself, that it needs to repeat for a certain amount of order. But it varies for the benchmark that we are simulating. It varies between 2x to around 50x.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think for your design, so you seems to be able to support different like error correction code, like those kind of things. So how much like the hardware needs to be designed, like in terms of complexity, to support those multiple schemes for the code part? Yeah.
So we support BCH code, where Hamming codes a spatial case of, and in that case, it scales linearly with the number of errors that it can correct.
Okay, so basically, the hardware is still like a specialized like hardware. It's not like a general purpose core for the checker, right? The checker is.
So we actually implement the metadata updates as a matrix multiplication with the error correction generator matrix. And then basically that structure of that matrix determines the error correction capability itself, but the number of non-zeros in the matrix is a determining factor for the overheads.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if there's no more question, let's thank the speaker again. And also, that's end our session. So if you have any follow-up question, you're welcome to hand over with the authors in the poster session. So right after this talk. So let's give another applause to the other authors, and let's finish this session. Thanks.